Welcome back to the Healthy Anger Toolbox, where we help you build your anger resilience and help you change to healthy anger expression. Please subscribe to my YouTube channel and the Spotify podcast as we open up for you the Healthy Anger Toolbox. Today, we're going to be talking about meditation as a healthy anger tool. And I'm just so grateful to have that meditation guy, Jimmy Wightman, out of the UK, join us. Welcome, Jimmy, to the Healthy Anger Toolbox.
Thank you. Yeah, I really appreciate you inviting me on, and I'm looking forward to getting into this topic.
So I discovered you actually on Instagram, Jimmy, and I was really intrigued by some of the stuff you had posted there in terms of actual meditations and different insights. And just to share my story, I recently, during the pandemic, actually, I was able to integrate some mind-body tools like mindfulness and meditation and yoga and some other things to really try to work on emotional control and my anger. And it's been hugely successful for me. And so that's why I was very excited and very inspired to talk to you to kind of break this down to figure out why is meditation so effective in terms of managing anger and being able to switch to healthy anger management and also expression?
This is something that was very interesting to me when I first got into meditation as well, because I was struggling with all kinds of mental health problems. That was my way into this, and it's been very fruitful for me also.
So I'm an overthinker. At first, I didn't really think that meditation was going to align with my energy and really be effective for me. And as I started out, I really started in small increments of just a couple of minutes. I started on the weekends and then extended it to a daily routine. But I really found it to be very effective in terms of how I was responding when I got into the heat of that emotional moment. I'm really interested in what goes on in the mind and body when I meditate to help me be more anger resilient.
Before we get into that, I should just point out that with meditation, it's kind of a vague term. A bit like the term exercise. So when somebody says they exercise, I don't really know what they're doing. There are lots of different exercises that come under that umbrella, and it's the same with meditation. But generally speaking, some techniques will have a powerful effect mostly on the nervous system in creating a biological shift that takes you out of survival mode, let's say, feeling threatened, and moving you into a mode that feels safe and relaxed. And so some meditation styles will be very effective in shifting you from one state to another in that sense. But there are some other ways to meditate that will have different effects. For example, I also like to teach mindfulness in a way that allows people to work directly with the psyche, to see what's happening in their moment to moment experience, to notice how thoughts are arising, what they're arising as, and to notice thoughts as thoughts rather than being tangled up in the stories that the thoughts tell. So, a number of ways that you can go at it, but a good way to divide it up would be to say some styles of meditation have a powerful effect on the nervous system, and some can work directly with the psyche.
So I appreciate your connection between mindfulness and meditation because I actually incorporate those kind of at around the same time, and it really shift my thinking patterns and my energy and what I focused on. And I appreciate also you bring up different types of meditation. So I'm going to learn a lot in terms of maybe expanding on understanding on that because I started out with breathing. And I teach breathing exercises as a trauma trainer, but really being able to integrate box breathing and 478 breathing and different breathing tools and strategies was where I started with this. Is that a common place for where people start in terms of breath work?
Absolutely, yeah, because the breath can be like a remote control for the nervous system. So going directly to the breath is probably the quickest and easiest way to create a biological shift in the nervous system, and that will, of course, affect the way the mind is operating. So I quite often get people to start with breathing before moving into any other kind of meditation, because the breath is a natural way to calm the mind body system down. So, and the breath itself alone can be a meditation. It's all interconnected.
And I was very surprised when I started to really monitor my breathing and try to follow the air all the way down to my belly breathing. I was surprised how attuned I started to become to my body and how my body reacted to certain things. And also the control I had. Like you mentioned, breathing being a remote control. I was very surprised that breathing was the starting point for that. And that really kind of gave me the confidence to keep moving and trying to dive into some different meditation techniques.
Yeah, I often talk about the breath as being a bridge that somebody can use that will get you from your normal, busy, stressful life into a place where you're comfortable enough to start actually bringing in some other kind of meditation technique. Because if you go directly from I'm stressed and busy and my thoughts are running crazy and my emotions are all over the place to just trying to go straight into a typical mindfulness meditation or some other style of meditation, you might just find that everything's just a bit too all over the place. So the breath is the bridge that can gather everything together, can make you feel grounded, and then from there, you can explore in any number of different directions.
And what was interesting for me, Jimmy, was I got out of my head and into my body. That was the difficult transition for me because I'm an overthinker. I can never really get out of those thinking patterns and focus on my body. And then when I was able to focus on my breath, it brought my attention to my body sensations, which was a very powerful transition for me.
So, can I ask a question? When you meditate, you're putting your attention in the body mostly, that correct? And then thoughts will come. So, how do you handle the thoughts as they arise?
I try to honor the thoughts and let them flow by, just honor them and look at them what they are. I have different mantras. My thoughts are not me, out of your head and into your body. I have some different things that I did in the beginning. It's rather easy for me to transition now because I've been doing it for a while, but just really kind of some self-talk was able to. And then when I started to monitor my breath, I realized there was a lot going on with my muscles and changing things with different tension and things like that. So I really started to be attuned to my body sensations, which then brought my thinking patterns down and allowed me to go for initially those couple minutes, but now up to a half an hour of being able to stay attuned to my body sensations.
Excellent. Yeah, that's really, really good. That all sounds like good stuff. Another way that I like to approach it, which people find useful, is to help people see what thoughts are. So a thought will be one of two things. It will either be a visual image, which seems to be projected on what seems to be a screen in the mind. We can all project that image. Most people, anyway. There are a few people who can't do that, but most people can put an image in their mind intentionally. Well, in fact, we're having images projected into the mind all the time, but most of them we don't notice. But those images will be affecting us on a subconscious level. So when you become aware that that is a visual thought that's happening, then that gives you a distance from it because I'm no longer sucked into the story of the thought, the visual image, but I'm able to witness it. So I'm moving out of being in the story to the witness to the story. And similarly, thoughts will also arise as a hearing experience. So the first one was a visual experience. Now there's a hearing experience. Usually it's the inner monologue. I'll suddenly become aware that I'm talking to myself. I'm guessing that's the thing that you're most familiar with. But sometimes it's the voice of another person, or sometimes it's a song that I heard on the radio. And if I can disidentify from those thoughts as being my thoughts or me talking to myself and just recognize, oh, I'm hearing something in the same way that I hear the wind in the leaves in the trees outside, I also hear this voice in my mind. And this voice in my mind, just like the wind in the trees, has a tone and a texture and a rhythm to it. And if I can notice that as, oh, I'm having visual thinking or I'm having auditory thinking, but not getting involved in the content, that is a way to move yourself into this witnessing position. And then you won't get sucked into what the storyline is about. She said this, he did that, or this problem is on the horizon, so on and so forth. And that's another way that I've personally found very useful of handling thoughts while you're trying to work with focusing on an object such as the breath.
So that really gives a different perspective in terms of how we view thoughts, maybe a new awareness, creates some distance between us and our thoughts, which is powerful, Jimmy. For us overthinkers, we many times are ruled by our thoughts and things shift, our emotional states shift based on our thinking patterns. And so that's powerful to really look at thoughts in a whole different way. I also find it was interesting when I discovered, especially with the breathing work, that specifically with the technique that I use, the 4-7-8 breathing, which is a inhale for 4 seconds, hold for 7 seconds, and then exhale for 8 seconds. That extended exhale, when I really start to understand the parasympathetic nervous system and how I can control with that extended exhale in terms of helping my body relax, that seemed to play into it as well, and really having control not only of my thoughts, but now moving down into my body.
Yeah, the extended exhale sends a powerful signal to the nervous system to say, I am safe. I'm not in any danger. There's nothing around that's going to eat me or squash me or poison me. So For some reason, our ancestors must have associated that, subconsciously associated that extended exhale with being in a safe place. And there are other things that you can do as well, which will send a similar message to the nervous system that you could stack with those practices. So I don't know if you've ever tried this, but a useful one is if you have your eyes open, don't focus on anything specifically, but just have an open gaze as if you're looking at the whole scene in front of you all at the same time, not focusing on anything specific. And that will have a similar effect. That will send a message to say, hey, I'm not in a dangerous situation. Everything is allowed to calm down. And I think this goes back to times when our ancestors living in tribes, when they were focusing intently, they were in hunting situations. So they had to be on their guard and on their game, and they had to have adrenaline in the system and they had to be alert. Using the gaze in this way, along with the breath, those things can stack up nicely and can be a very good way to get yourself into a good place either as a meditation on its own or as a way into bringing in some other technique, which might be a little bit more complex.
The gaze, and that's a whole new thing. I appreciate that. I learned something about. I'm gonna take another look at that to be able to integrate that. That's interesting. Now, you mentioned different types of meditation. I'm all fired up about what I've been able to use and how effective it's been for me. But are there some specific types that for people that struggle with anger issues, some types of meditation are more effective than others?
It would be different for different people. So I can give you a framework, really, if you like, that will tell you all the different types of meditation and how they fit together. And then we can look at
Wow,
how that can affect anger, if you like.
that would
So
be great.
sure, yeah. So my teacher Shinzen came up with this way of categorizing meditation. He's quite scientifically minded in that way. And he said there's four categories: appreciate, transcend, positivity, and express. So techniques that fall into the category of appreciate would be like we've been talking about, focusing on the breath, focusing on body sensations, that kind of thing. If you're appreciating something as it is in the moment, not trying to tinker with it or manipulate it or change it or trying to change yourself in any way, just appreciating something as it is, then that would fall into that particular category. The next one is transcend. If you've ever heard of transcendental meditation, that would fall into this category. That's where you effortlessly use a mantra. You're not being mindful of the mantra, really. You're just allowing the mantra to act like a vehicle that transports your attention away from the surface level of the mind, where thoughts are fully formed and fully verbalized, down into deeper levels of mind. And you can even have these moments where you transcend the thinking process altogether. It's like a sort of dropping out of consciousness, and you have a sense of missing time almost. And that can be very rejuvenating for the mind and body, transcending the mind for a while. Very, very peaceful state to fall into. Another category, like we discussed, was positivity. So if you do loving kindness meditations or gratitude meditations, or even a visualization, if you're a sports person and you want to win a game, you can visualize some outcome. That can be a meditation. And then the final column is express, which is a little bit unusual, but my teacher was a Zen monk, and living in the Zen monastery, he learned that meditation isn't just something you do while you're sitting quietly on a cushion, but as you're moving around your life, there's a spontaneous, just happening quality to everything you're doing. And if you become aware of that and you tune into that and you allow your movements and your speaking and everything to be expressed fully, that itself can be a kind of meditation. So the ones that will mostly fit in here for helping with anger management would be the first three. Appreciate would be appreciating the breath as we've discussed, that can have a powerful effect on the nervous system. When we do transcendental meditation, or what I often refer to as effortless mantra meditation, that can also shift us out of the fight or flight response into the rest and digest response. So that has a powerful biological effect on the nervous system. That helps with anger because it's getting those hormones, adrenaline and cortisol, out of the bloodstream, and it's injecting into the bloodstream happy hormones like serotonin and oxytocin, hormones that make us feel happy and loved and rewarded. So that, of course, will have a soothing effect on the body, on the nervous system. And of course, that will have a soothing effect on the mind. And then in nurturing positivity, when we work with gratitude and loving, kind intentions, we're not just appreciating what's there, but we're actively trying to train ourselves to be more loving and kind or full of gratitude or whatever the thing is, whatever the positive factor is that we're trying to train. We do that, and that will have a powerful effect on the brain. The parts of the brain that become active when those particular emotions are active will get a workout, a bit like a muscle in the gym. And the more we work out those parts of the brain, the more they will grow, they will become active, and then the more we will have access to those just as a baseline, because what we practice grows stronger. So practice loving kindness, you become more loving and kind. Practice gratitude, you become more aware of the good things in your life. So all the different types of meditation can have an effect on anger. The ones that I would specifically look at, though, would be, and this is probably just my preference because it's what's helped me and what I teach, would be something like transcendental meditation, effortless mantra meditation, that kind of thing. I really like that because it works in a quick time. It has a very powerful effect on the nervous system, and it's very quick to learn, it's very easy to do, and it will shift you out of fight or flight into the restful relaxation mode very quickly. So that's my favorite for people who are coming to me looking for more emotional control, but they want something easy and quick that they can fit into their life without having to go through an 8 week course or anything. I can teach that really super quick. But some people, they want insight into how their mind works. So that takes a bit longer to teach. And that would be mindfulness. That would fall into the category of appreciate. And that's like we talked about before. I could teach somebody a technique called see, hear, feel, and you would become aware of visual images in the mind, inner talk, and also the emotions in the body. And you can also start to understand yourself as a sensory system where what you see, what you hear, and what you feel internally is all triggering each other. So thoughts trigger body emotion triggers more thoughts. Thoughts show up in, say, visual images that can trigger verbal speak in the mind, that can trigger more body emotion, and so it goes. But once you deconstruct it all and see it clearly, then you become the witness and everything can calm down. My teacher often says the phrase, what's tractable is manageable, meaning like what you can track, you can manage. So if you can see everything clearly and you can track what's going on, then you're able to stay on top of it and find some emotional control. And so that's very useful for people with anger issues.
You really broke that down very specifically, Jimmy, and I appreciate that. You brought up a couple of things there that really kind of hit home with me. You mentioned happy hormones. And once I realized that we can control the release of the neurochemicals in our brain and that meditation and mindfulness and some of the other somatosensory, the mind body techniques actually will release those happy hormones, that seemed very empowering to me in the beginning. And I was very focused on having the release and saw some of the benefits of that as well. Also, when you got into the brain and what we focus on is what we feel, and the loving kindness meditation, the gratitude meditation, if we can refocus, and a lot of my self-talk, a lot of my thinking was negative thinking. And by refocusing on that through meditation, that was able to help me get more of a understanding as to what I can focus on and how I can be more grateful for things. Now, you also mentioned being able to integrate it and move from sitting down and being focused with intentional meditation, but also being out there moving around and being able to take moments and spots to be able to do some just spontaneous meditation. I found myself doing that in the car, in the men's room. There's all sorts of times when I can drop into a meditative state. It's not totally conducive many times with my environment, but I can get there. I can actually get to the place where I can calm myself. I get into my breathing, and I've been in some very interesting situations where just 1 or 2 minutes of meditation in the moment has been very helpful.
One of the things about mindfulness is that it's completely portable. So if you have a drive every day that is an hour to work and an hour home, that's 2 hours of meditation that you could get. And it will be completely safe, provided that you make your focus range things that will make you a better driver. So not a good time to be using a mantra, of course, but as long as you've got your eyes open and you're focusing on what you can see, hear, feel externally, allowing yourself to not be distracted by visual images and inner talk, but really focusing on external visual images arising, the feeling of the body in the chair and the feeling of the feet on the pedals and things like that, then you'll actually become a much better driver and you will be training mindfulness. So I'll just quickly give people a definition of what I mean by mindfulness, just so it isn't vague. Mindful awareness arises when three core skills come together. And those core skills are concentration, sensory clarity, and equanimity. Concentration is simply the ability to put your attention somewhere and have it stay there without too much effort. Sensory clarity is the ability to notice details in your experience and to be able to track those details in real time. And equanimity is a kind of inner balance. You can think of it as the ability to not be pushed or pulled by inner forces. So when these three things come together, you've got mindful awareness. So there's no reason why you can't train mindful awareness while you're driving or while you're walking or while you're cooking or doing any sort of simple task. And then over time, you can even do it when there are more difficult tasks. And also, you can do it, as you've discovered, in the background. So, one of the things I do when I teach mindfulness is I say to the class, okay, everybody, you know how to do this now. I'm going to read you a story. I want you to listen to this story and understand it. But in the background, have 10 or 20% of your attention on a technique, and that's background practice.
Hmm.
Or they can do micro hits, which is what you described, where you do 1 minute of intense meditation in a situation where you just happen to have a minute or two where you're not going to be bothered by something else. So there are lots of different ways that you can fit this in. And my teacher had a phrase for this. He called this, let the monastery come to you, bring the monastery to you. So most of us, we can't go and be a yogi in a cave. We can't go and join a monastery. So we find ways of working with this where the operating software of our mind can be upgraded bit by bit by bit, just by every minute that we spend doing these techniques when the time is available to us.
So I'm really hearing that mindfulness and meditation are BFFs, and really being able to understand both tools and be able to integrate them is it the most powerful and effective way, which I'm on that journey. I'm kind of, it's a work in progress. Let's back up a little bit, Jimmy, in terms of beginners. So people who are just raising their awareness and just getting some level of understanding and now want to start and do something different. I shared how I started, but what's the most common way for someone who maybe is not connected with meditation and mindfulness to get them started, especially if they may have some thoughts and beliefs already around what meditation is and what it can do?
The way I like to break it down is to say, look at these three factors, and these three factors are interest, opportunity, and necessity. So go through those three things and see how that stands out for you. So interest would simply be what you're called to. Do you like the idea of sitting quietly and going inward with a mantra and feeling tranquil? Or do you like the idea of meditation on the go, walking meditation and driving meditation? Are you really interested in training presence and getting very clear on your moment to moment experience and deconstructing the nature of thoughts? Or do you just want to be soothed and feel calm? Are you drawn towards a spiritual tradition like Zen, something like that? Or does that feel very off-putting to you? So when people look at their interests, that's a great way to start off. What just naturally calls to you? And then opportunity is, what have you got the opportunity to actually practice in your life? If you've got plenty of free time, then you might want to do an hour of meditation in the morning, an hour in the evening. That will have a very powerful effect. But a lot of people will laugh at the idea of that and say, don't be ridiculous. I've got a full-time job. I've got three kids. Of course, I can't do that. Fair enough. Then in that case, your opportunity is a little bit different. So we'll tweak this in a way that works for you. Some people will say, I can do 20 minutes twice a day, and that's proven. That's a good one, a way to approach it. But some people will say, I can't even do that. So then we might work with 10 minutes a day with plus background hits and micro hits, things like that. So there's plenty of ways that we can work with it. But interest is the first one, opportunity is the next one, and then necessity. Like, what is in your life that you need to give attention to with these practices? So if it's anger, then okay, we really need to focus on the nervous system, because you can't think your way out of anger. You really need to work with the nervous system. And then maybe once we've got some nervous system control, we can start to look at how to deconstruct thoughts. But I'd go to the nervous system first. So practices that will soothe the body and mind, allow the body mind to find some balance, that's probably the best place to go. But yeah, it just depends on the person and what they're looking for. So interest, opportunity, necessity is a framework that a person can use to decide what direction to go in.
And what was actually happening for me, Jimmy, is now I'm going back to when I started. I started and stopped a couple times. I got very frustrated in the beginning because I'm an overthinker that I wasn't able to really get disciplined with my thoughts, and I hadn't gotten into my body yet in terms of understanding body sensations. So then I would give up. And it took me like the third time to really say, okay, I need to build some more structure around this, make sure I focus and be a little more intentional about it. But I did get frustrated in the beginning because it really wasn't clicking right away. And so I'm wondering, do you find that a lot in the people that you work with in the beginning? It just is a little bit of a learning curve in terms of getting there?
100%. Almost everybody has a rough beginning of the journey. I would say that having a structure in place at the beginning is really, really important. And that's what got me into meditation and made me stick with it. I don't think I would have done it if I was just trying to find little spots to do a little bit here and there. I don't think I would have got the return on investment that would have made me keep going. So when I started out, I first started with this effortless mantra meditation, also known as transcendental meditation or Vedic meditation. That's 20 minutes twice a day. 20 minutes in the morning before breakfast, and then 20 minutes in the afternoon or evening once lunch is digested, because you don't want to do that kind of meditation with a full stomach. And so I stuck to that very rigidly. I believed in it because there was a lot of scientific research that said this is powerful and this will work. And then eventually I became a teacher, and that was the first thing that I taught. That was the only thing I taught for many years. So 20 minutes twice a day, stick to it rigidly. I know that works for people. It won't be for everybody, but it did show me that having a structure in place and with my students really, really banging it home, like you've got to stick to this, seemed to have a big impact. And sure, people will fall off the wagon now and again, but if they know what the structure is and what they're supposed to be doing, then they will tend to stick to it. I also tell people that when you try and meditate and then you fall off the wagon, not to feel too guilty about it, because everybody does that. And you don't want to have a guilty relationship with practice. You don't want it to become another thing on your list of things that you're supposed to do because you're a self-improvement project and you're trying to make yourself better. You can get quite stuck in that. And I don't really like that either. So if you miss it, no problem, but just keep coming back to it. Enjoy it while you do it. And also, don't worry about how the meditation is going. Some people judge the meditation itself as good because it was tranquil or bad because I had lots of thoughts. And that is another trap that you can fall into. Lots of thoughts in meditation simply means there's a lot of emotional processing going on during the meditation time. So your mind and body is getting what it needs, even when you're not having a pleasant experience. You're sometimes re-experiencing suppressed emotions that weren't fully felt when they first happened. Now the body feels safe enough to bring those up and experience them. Similarly, thoughts are firing off because the nervous system is releasing stress, and that's triggering mental activity. So once somebody has a framework of understanding exactly what's going on and why it's going on, then they can relax and they don't need to get caught up in the story of this is good, this is bad. So that's also important. And I found that people, once they have all of the bits of the jigsaw in place, then they will tend to stick to it and they will have a practice that can last many, many years. And quite often, the practice will have a certain arc to it because what you start off with will quite often resolve itself. I started off with problems with mental health, and that's all I wanted to fix. And then over time, once those problems were resolved, my interest, opportunity, necessity turned to a different direction. I got more interested in meditating on questions and the spiritual side of meditation and things like that. So most people will have a bit of a journey with this, and that's really beautiful to be a part of and to watch as well.
Oh, it is a beautiful journey. And it reminds me as you share that, Jimmy, that, mental exercise is a lot like physical exercise. Some people go to the gym for a short period of time, then they quit and back off. And I realized getting in the car for physical exercise was just the thing. Getting in the car, once I got to the gym, everything was great. And I really transferred that type of commitment, as you're saying, because I didn't want to quit meditation. I was just trying to figure things out. but being able to realize that I had to lean into it, set up some structure, like you said, 20 minutes in the morning, and I think I did maybe 10 minutes in the evening. But the idea is to have a commitment to it, knowing that it's going to be tough to get started, but then slowly but surely being able to really understand and feel the effects of that.
Quite often I say, your only job is to get yourself into the chair. How the meditation goes isn't up to you, and you have no way of knowing, or you shouldn't be trying to control that anyway. You just do the technique as it's been taught every day for the right amount of time, and then you're doing everything correctly. And another thing that's worth mentioning here is that we talked about this biological shift that takes you out of stress mode and into relax mode. That's called the relaxation response. That's the opposite trigger to the fight or flight mode. Funnily enough, the fight or flight mode, that trigger in the biology, was discovered in the 1950s by this guy called Walter Cannon. And then in the 70s, this guy called Herbert Benson discovered that we have an opposite trigger. And he called it the relaxation response. Now, that relaxation response kicks in around 12 to 15 minutes into the meditation, provided that you're doing a repetitive kind of meditation. So with a
Okay.
mantra or focusing on breath, that can do it. So quite often when people say I do 10 minutes, I say, oh, see if you can just up it to 15, because 12 to 15, that's quite often when you'll get the shift biologically, which clears stress hormones out of the system and introduces those happy hormones that we mentioned earlier.
And so, really being empowered to know that meditation is something that I can actually control. One of the things with anger was about understanding what I can control and can't control, and being able to focus on that. And meditation has really empowered me to expand what I can control in terms of thinking and understanding my body and the happy hormones that we can release. And it feels like there may be a bit of a journey, as you mentioned, to kind of get started and integrated and get the expanded benefits of that. But it's also worth it. Understanding in terms of anger resilience and being able to get into a heat of an angry moment, how these mind body techniques and tools can actually be effective for us. So, one of the final questions I'm curious about, Jimmy, is in terms of long-term effects and benefits and short-term benefits. Do you find meditation to be more of like a long-term anger resilience thing, or is it something you can go to in the heat of an angry moment? If I'm being confronted or dealing with a situation that's, getting dysregulated, is it as effective in the moment as it is in terms of long-term, in your opinion?
It will work in both ways. So if you're doing the daily practice and you're teaching your body to calm down every day, then you will find a new baseline and you're operating from a new baseline. Some people are chronically stressed and they live in the fight or flight mode. So as soon as anything goes wrong, they're already halfway into the angry state anyway. They're living on the edge. So you bring these practices in that will train the mind-body system to be operating in a different way, where you're already in the relax, everything is okay, I'm just cruising through life mode. And then, of course, you will be triggered because that's life and that's the way it goes. But you will have created a new baseline. So once the threat is seen to be benign, you will slip straight back down into a better state of consciousness than you would naturally be living in. And that was one of the bits of science that I came across when I was researching all this in the early days, is that meditators still get triggered just as much as everybody else, but the difference is that they move back to baseline much quicker than the average person. So that's really, really useful. And the other thing is, if you learn how to be mindful of how yourself as a sensory system operates, then in the moment you can apply a technique which will save you from being caught up in the storm that's happening in the moment. So, for example, let's say I am in an argument with somebody and they're being quite aggressive towards me. My natural reaction might be that I feel this surge of adrenaline, cortisol floods into my body, and I might want to react. But if I can just step back for a second and become aware of what's happening in the inner see, hear, feel experience, then suddenly I'm the witness. So it's highly likely in a situation like that, there'll be images projected onto what feels like a screen in my mind, like we discussed earlier. Now, normally I would not see these images because they would be happening subconsciously. And I would be so focused on what's in front of me because evolutionary, that's how I'd be wired to be, that these images would push me. Now, if you're ever in a situation like this and you become conscious of what's going on that mental screen, you'll be amazed at what happens. I've seen on that mental screen when I've been in difficult situations images of bullies from when I was a kid. So my mind is like serving that up, like, hey, maybe this is the situation you're in.
Wow.
Also, images from horror movies from years ago, things like that. So it's very strange to become conscious of that part of your experience when you're in a situation where tempers are getting frayed in that way. Also, if you become aware of your own internal monologue, but disidentified from it as being yours, that can be strange as well because you might suddenly hear the voice in your mind is angry and swearing, and that could, if you weren't mindful, that could just flow out of your mouth unfiltered at the other person. But if you switch into the hearing, then you realize, oh, okay, that is just a hearing experience, and I'm going to act as a filter now and not let that flow out. And similarly, those kind of experiences are going to trigger lots and lots of body emotion. We have physical sensations and we have emotional body experience, but emotions always have a location in the body. For example, when I'm sad, I will feel it around the eyes, or when I'm smiling, I'm happy, I'll feel it around the mouth. When I'm in love or I'm joyful, I feel it in the chest. And when I'm nervous, I'll feel it in the stomach, and on it goes. So with anger, there's a very powerful physical sensation. The fists will clench up, the shoulders will become very, very tense, the jaw becomes tense. If I can become aware of it and then intentionally relax those things, that will send a message to the nervous system to say, hey, it's all right. We're actually not in a violent situation here. We can calm down, we can relax, and the other person will feel this and they will start to be soothed because we have this thing called co-regulation. So if I regulate myself, you will naturally feel that and you will start to regulate yourself. Yeah, there's lots of different ways that we can work with this, but that's the way I like to divide it up. We've got working directly with the nervous system by focusing on breath or mantra or something like that. And then we can also deconstruct the moment to moment experience in terms of see, hear, feel. And when you use both of these things together in your life, then you'll have an enormous amount of emotional control.
Such an amazing perspective and such valuable information. Jimmy, I originally found you when I was surfing Instagram, just to share that meditation guy. You can find you on Instagram, but I went to your website, so delvedeep.com, and saw an amazing amount of resources there. So I was drawn into kind of your world and your story and your journey. So do you get a lot of connection with that in terms of what resources you're offering people at your website? I guess a lot of people really react positively to that.
Yeah, I like to do courses over Zoom. So I like to interact with people as much as possible. And because I'm well known on Instagram, people are all over the world. On a course recently, I had somebody who was on an oil rig in the middle of the ocean somewhere. So
Okay.
it's really strange. You can get people from all over the world, and I like to interact with people on a one-on-one basis. So I don't have my own meditation app or anything like that. But I have put guided meditations up on YouTube, like you said, and other places, so people can do those in their own time. But what I found is that people really need more than just a guided meditation. They need to understand the framework and the concepts. Then they need the practice. And then ideally, they'll get some feedback from what's happening. And when you put all of the pieces in place for a person, then really all you can do then is just let them go, and time, nature, and grace will kind of guide them in a direction that's very, very positive. As long as you've got the foundations in place, everything will work quite nicely. Certainly having somebody that you can get feedback from, not necessarily me, but any qualified meditation coach that knows what they're doing. I've found that useful for myself personally. I've referenced my personal teacher a number of times, an 80-year-old monk. That seems to be useful because sometimes people do go down blind alleys and cul-de-sacs and can get a bit stuck in various places. So having somebody who can readjust your course can be useful. But also, with that said, if a person's not ready for that level of instruction, that's fine. Any amount of meditation is good. Just start where you are and see how it works for you.
And that feedback and accountability can be huge in terms of being able to integrate this practice. Thank you very much, Jimmy Wightman. I appreciate you. Hopefully, we may be able to come back and have another conversation sometime in the future. Appreciate you, Jimmy. Thanks.
But cheers for having me on. I've really enjoyed it, and it's been really nice to meet you, Marty.
You as well. And if you want to have more information, please join us at healthyangertoolbox.com.